أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه وخاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيد الأولين والآخرين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum again. You can tell it's a Monday. So weekend is over. So Jazakallah for your attendance and patience throughout the lectures. Inshallah, I pray that whatever we are discussing is accepted by Allah and inshallah is of benefit. Tonight, inshallah, I want to continue the theme of human rights as we have been discussing, but from the perspective of international law and the international community. And what I mean by this is that on a day-to-day basis, whenever we switch on the TV or look on the news or whatever, we're always looking at, for example, the policy of America or policy of UK towards Middle East, or what is happening in Bahrain or Australia or Indonesia, etc. Now, whenever we are switching on the news and we're looking at what's happening around the world and what governments are doing, this in itself is very, very important, because basically we are seeing how the international community, how the global governments are actually acting in the world and what vision they have for the world. So, and you and I know this because we'd say, well, why is Middle East so important, let's say, to America and Britain? Why, for example, are some extremist Sunnis or Wahhabis being very oppressive to Shias in other parts of the world in relation to Muslim affairs, let's say? Whenever we look at the news and we see that states and governments are working together, maybe at times they are breaking promises, maybe at times they're doing good things, maybe at times they're searching for oil, we have to understand what is behind all of that. And that subject is known as international law. The way in which states and governments are acting with each other and forming what we call the international or global community. This is a subject in itself. You study this as part of law. And within that, you also have to look at the processes and mechanisms by which governments and states make decisions. A simple example is that if today, for example, America says, right, we're now, for example, going to hunt down ISIS, all right? Let's say it comes up with a new policy and starts to do airstrikes or whatever, same thing with UK. When it makes this decision, who holds America account for this? How does it make the decision? Where does it get support from? We have to understand this, because if we want to criticize this policy or we want to respond to it and say, well, wait, there is a better way of going about these things, or we want to engage in this kind of discussion, we have to understand how this international process is working. This is one important thing. The second thing is, whilst, and I will explain what international law is, the second thing is, not everything is bad, right? Whatever we are seeing in the news, maybe we get a lot of bad news. We see, death and suffering all the time. But there are also noble objectives, and we discussed in the last two lectures that human rights is something positive. Right to life and right of association and assembly, right not to be tortured, right of free speech. These are good things, these are good values. And the international community tries to promote these values. At the same time, however, as we discussed yesterday, it can also abuse these values. It can try to say, well, some people deserve some rights and some of the human beings don't deserve rights. Maybe some Muslims don't deserve rights. Or a Muslim's life is worth less than a non-Muslim's life. So it can abuse rights or be selective about rights. Now here we come to the idea of trying to manipulate or exploit rules in the world in order to accomplish political objectives. What we mentioned yesterday, we said that human rights, whilst in theory can be very noble, it can be used as an instrument to justify invasions. And the example we discussed yesterday was, for example, America and Britain saying, we are going to invade a Middle Eastern country to give rights, to establish democracy, to reduce suffering. But of course, they will bomb villages and bomb children and all sorts of things. So there is clearly a problem. Whilst in theory something sounds nice, in practice it is very problematic. In Karbala and during the journey of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, what we saw governors getting together, we saw Yazid ibn Muawiyah enacting policies in order to isolate Hussein alayhi salam, to isolate his message, and to put fear into people. And not only that, to spy on Hussein alayhi salam. Now I'm going to go into this as well in the lecture, which is the way in which international law and the international community is used to spy on Muslims, is used to create extremist groups. MI5 and CIA are used to develop extremists and train extremists. This is well recorded, and I'm going to give you some proof of that. So spying and going behind people's backs to accomplish objectives also occurred in Karbala. And maybe you can say this is part of human nature. Craftiness and manipulation is part of us. You know, today, for example, I could be very manipulative to you in the way that I talk to you. How do you know that I'm not making up something? How do you know that I'm not manipulating your mind? All of us can do this to each other. The way I talk to you, what facts I use, the way you talk to me, we can manipulate each other because it's part of our nature. However, the Prophet has always said, we have many hadith, always we are told, make a good niyat. Even if we can't accomplish our deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward our niyat because He sees that His servant has been sincere, that his heart has been sincere. Whether or not we accomplish the deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look on our hearts favorably. And we know from many hadith, for example, that in our hearts reside the biggest idol. And what is the biggest idol? It's not the external idol of a statue. The biggest idol is ego. The biggest idol is me being arrogant and thinking that I am something, thinking that I am superior to others. Yazid ibn Muawiyah believed he was superior to Hussein alayhi salam, believed that he had a greater right because of his lineage, believed that morality did not mean anything. He could carry out his egos and desires and whims even if people died. And even, for example, whenever we hear Maqtal and Gambayan at the end of the lecture, and we hear words, for example, from Yazid or his commanders saying, "Oh Hussein, we will never let you take a sip of water. We will come and hunt you and your family down. We will kill you till your last breath." Don't we hear these things all the time? They kill Hussein alayhi salam without any sense of proportion. No, when we heard the Arabic from Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam, إِنَّهُ كَمَا ذُبِحَ يُذْبَحُ الْكَبْشِ, that he was killed like a sheep, slaughtered like a sheep is slaughtered. That means that they had no sense of even measuring in the way to kill. Whereas when you look at the value and conduct of Imam Ali alayhi salam, you see the total opposite. You see control of desire. You don't see ego getting the better of him. And there's a famous story which you have all heard, which I think is in the Battle of Khaybar, where the soldier is fighting Imam Ali alayhi salam, and Imam Ali alayhi salam is actually more victorious in that battle. And he actually then is able to kill that soldier. I think his name is Amid, or Amid ibn Nawid. And when Imam alayhi salam is about to kill the soldier spits on Imam alayhi salam. He spits on him. At that point, Imam Ali alayhi salam has a monumental choice to make. Monumental choice. He can kill him, and even if he just kills him after spitting, and he kills him with that anger, and he kills him with that passion, probably even today we would still be narrating his story. We would still be doing wahwa to him. Although it is not correct, because the real value of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam is his mercy. As we know from the very famous story, he stops, he pauses, he stands up, and he waits, he measures himself, and then strikes one blow. Because he is not killing for his ego, he is not killing for revenge, he is not killing out of passion. He is killing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we say Allah is Rahman and Rahim, who are we then, if we are representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are we to go and kill in anger, and to act in anger, and to use our ego? So the beautiful message of Karbala is this control of the ego, is not to allow superiority and arrogance to overtake us. But the baser side of the human being, as we see in Karbala, I'm going to narrate you an incident, is when Yazid ibn Muawiyah uses spying, uses infiltration, and uses a threat in order to make sure that Hussein alayhi salam's message is isolated. One of the best examples of this in Karbala is what happens to Muslim ibn Aqil, which that the maqtal will be about him tonight. Muslim ibn Aqil, on his journey, when he reached Kufa, he was very pleased in the sense that people were responding to him. People said, we're going to support you, and we have reports, I think, from Sheikh al-Mufid that 18,000 people were willing to support Muslim ibn Aqil and the message of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. However, Ibn Ziyad paid a servant of his to go and spy on Muslim ibn Aqil. So when he reached the city, Ibn Ziyad told his servant, I think his servant's name was Ma'qal, he told him to go and spy on Muslim ibn Aqil. And this servant was very clever, because what he did was, he was the first one in the gathering of Muslim ibn Aqil, and Muslim ibn Aqil was making speeches and getting support. This servant was the first one to attend and the last one to leave. And he was paid very handsomely for this. And when Muslim ibn Aqil was then staying at Hani ibn Urwa's house, etc., it was because of this servant that Muslim ibn Aqil was arrested, that he was hunted down. Otherwise, it's possible he may never have been found. You know, he was very careful, Muslim ibn Aqil. But because of spying, Muslim ibn Aqil was of course arrested, then brought to Ibn Ziyad. That was one effect of the spying and infiltration. The second effect of the infiltration was that they were able to bribe the Kufan people, or intimidate the wives and the children and the husbands, and look, if you go and support Hussein alayhi salam, we're going to kill your family, or you know, your houses are under threat. And they just put absolute fear, to the extent that when Muslim ibn Aqil was leading prayers in Kufa, you know, in the first line, you know, there were many people, and then when he finished his prayer, there were only a few people left. So you can imagine that winning the hearts and minds of people is such a crucial thing. You know, today, I mean, we know that a non-Muslim that reads the newspaper or watches the media, and he's not exposed to anything, he doesn't come to this center, he's not exposed to Muslims, he will believe everything. He will believe certainly that Muslims are to be feared. And I gave the example yesterday, they did the same thing with communism. They did the same thing to make sure that Americans feared communists inside the country and outside of the country. Winning the hearts and minds of people using psychological warfare is one of the key trends today, in order to make sure that, for example, America and UK can go inside Iraq. And not only that, that inside Iraq, whenever we see reports Sunni and Shia, so-called Sunni and Shia fighting each other, and you know, the media always says, oh look, you know, these Muslims are always fighting against each other. We don't just fight each other just ourselves. It's because we are propelled to do that by believing in certain things, by having insecurities, by having fears against each other. Sometimes these fears come from ourselves, because let's say I don't understand you and I'm ignorant about you. But at other times it's because information is pumped into my mind that I have to believe that you are to be feared. And that's the way we fight each other. What I want to demonstrate in this lecture is my humble research tells me that generally the Muslim community, though we talk about these things, we always say, oh, this is double standard policy of America and UK. We'll say that over Fatiha and Chai. We'll say, oh look, America is doing this and Britain is doing this, etc. Fine. We'll say in a khutbah that people are dying and we must pray for them. And we understand what is happening in the world. We understand that this policy is not honest. We understand that psychological warfare goes on. We understand that two groups of Muslims fighting each other doesn't just happen like that. We understand that. But what we may not understand how to do is research this information, present it, and try to make a counter argument to the media, to other people, and to provide evidence that what you are doing, we can prove this. And to be aware that 50 to 100 years we can try to stop this. Ultimately, if somebody invades a Muslim country, or somebody is using Islamophobia in this country to isolate Muslims, just like Hussein al-Islam was isolated, his message was totally isolated. If somebody is doing that, it's not that we can't do anything, that we are helpless. People will always exploit other people. Even we may exploit each other. But we have to be strong. We are also to blame if we allow these ideas to seep into the community and we don't do anything about it. If we just say, let us just pray, for Muslims, praying will only do so much. Allah has said, Amrul Ma'ruf and Nahyul Munkar. Act. If we don't act, and I said yesterday, we must build institutions, we must invest in media institutions, we must not be content with our Islamic channels, which are just giving majalis and dua. If we don't have a vision, then we ourselves are to blame. So when Hussein al-Islam makes a stand, against Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he is choosing to act. He's not just choosing to pray. Now I have one of the reports here, but I'll just give you a summary, is that Hussein al-Islam was repeatedly told, "Oh Hussein, do not stand firm against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Do not." Why? And you all know what he was told. He says, he was told that your life would be under threat. Don't try to disrupt and cause disunity in the community. Wasn't he told this? He was always told, do not go ahead with your journey because you're going to destabilize the community. Why do you want to cause disunity? Why do you want to disrupt the policies of Yazid ibn Muawiyah? Okay, fine, there is a bit of fear that people are experiencing. Doesn't matter. Do not go on this journey. Now, aren't we told the same thing? If we, in this community, I'm taking a Shia community, Sunni community, the whole of Muslim community, we discussed yesterday this problem of speaking out and trying to give a new opinion, maybe about the way Islam should be. And I did give a submission that Hussein alayhi salam's vision of humanity, the way he treated Wahab Haniya Qamar, the way he treated Hur, the way he treated his own Muslims, giving respect, respecting their beliefs, respecting their cultures, not labeling them, whereas we label non-Muslims today, sometimes calling them najis and other labels. My humble submission to you was that we are far away from Hussein al-Islam's vision, if you agree with me. You may disagree with me. But my point to you was that if we are afraid to speak these things, we are afraid, then we are giving in to the Umayyad governors that told Hussein alayhi salam the same thing. Yeah. Look, we are not perfect, as I said. Muslims are not perfect and non-Muslims are not perfect. So we have to be able to be courageous enough, one, to understand what is happening in the international community. And then number two, to realize, are we effective participants in the international community? Do we have an effective voice in the international community today? Will anybody listen to a Muslim leader? Will anybody really take a Muslim community seriously? Will anybody listen to a Muslim scholar? Do we have that weight in the community at this moment? I would say in most cases we don't have that. Most of the Muslim governors or Muslim leaders are bought anyway by Western powers, but that's also their fault. But even at a local level, we have very poor ties with non-Muslims, with media and other organizations. So one of the things that we can learn from Hussein al-Islam is that courage to have a voice. If we can understand that, then we can participate in the international community. Salawat. So we come onto this idea of, what is international law? And I gave you a brief description, but let me go into it. When you talk about American law, or British law, or Australian law, you're talking about law that is only concerned with the people residing in that country. If America makes a policy, it's to do fundamentally, a domestic policy or domestic law, is to do with people at home. It's got nothing to do with people abroad. Okay, now, there is a bit of blurring with this distinction, but let's just make it very simple. Ultimately, countries are concerned with their own people, traffic laws, laws for businesses, laws of how to live, laws of setting up centers in the country. This is all to do with America or Britain or whichever country, and nothing to do with the international community. But when you talk about international community or international law, what does that mean? International law is concerned with the agreements and the laws between states. That's the difference. So, if, for example, Britain and America make a pact, we are not going to go with war with each other. We're not going to invade each other. Or we're going to make a pact that we will work together to improve the environment. You're already talking about international law, because now countries are getting together to make an agreement. The second aspect of international law is that the international law operates on similar values. We discussed human rights. Another example is environment. There is something common about international law because states are working together with some similar values. However, you won't see that with countries. So Saudi Arabia, living in Saudi Arabia, a woman that lives in Saudi Arabia and perhaps can't drive, okay, is going to be fundamentally different to a woman living in America and Britain that has the opportunity to drive, for example, right? Countries can be very different with each other, but the international community operates on some similar values. So when you're talking about international law, you're talking about states collaborating and working with each other. And that is noble, because that's a move forward. Ultimately, why is it that we have different cultures in this center? Why is it that we're trying to work together? Isn't it better that we coordinate with each other? We can use our resources together to build a bigger center. It's good to work with other Muslim centers because we can have a voice. So working together isn't something unique to Western powers or anything. Working together and working internationally is a good thing. This is a noble thing. However, as is the topic of these lectures, unfortunately at times you can have strategies or policies of injustice when you work with each other. It is possible that states and governments can come together and say, right, we're now going to create injustice or dhulm against a group of people for our own personal and political agendas. And I want to share with you how this is done. The reason I'm telling you this is because, you might disagree with me, but whenever I have heard majalis or khutbah on something happening in Israel and Palestine or Iraq, I feel that the Muslim community is too general about it. We always say, oh, Palestinians are suffering, so we have to give charity. Or let's go and protest, right? We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the suffering is reduced of Palestinians. These are the type of messages we give. This is too general. This is too superficial. We have to have knowledge about what's happening. How are international states able to accomplish this injustice? If we can figure that out, we can argue against it, can't we? If we just say something very general and superficial about things, how are we meant to know how to respond to these injustices? That's why I want to share with you these things. The first thing, and there are many things about international, I just want to deal with two. International law is known as soft law. Soft law means that a law does not have enforcement procedures like courts or policemen. Now, if you look at in America, for example, or Britain, generally speaking, the law is known as hard law. Let me give you an example. if you run through a red traffic light, what are going to be the penalties? You know that probably there's a camera there or there's a police car, so you will get fined. Not only will you get fined, but let's say if life is in danger or you have a car crash, you'll go to court and the judge will ask you what happened. If you eventually kill somebody, God forbid, maybe there's a threat of imprisonment and you know that you're going to go to jail. So you know there is enforcement and police that are going to monitor your actions. But with international law, it's known as soft law, because who is there to monitor America's actions? Who is there to monitor Britain's actions? Tell me. Who is there to put Tony Blair or George Bush or another president? Who is there to put them on account of war crimes and to hold them accountable? Nobody. Because we don't have a court structure in international law. It's something that people are actually arguing for. They say, look, we have to have enforcement to put people in jail, to actually hold people accountable. Now we have to understand this argument. Because if we're able to make this argument, we can very boldly and audaciously say that we now want to set up international courts. We want to argue for enforcement procedures. And we want to develop Muslim lawyers and Muslim thinkers to accomplish this. We have to have this vision. We are nowhere near this vision, by the way. We think we're helpless. We think that, we can't do anything. Well, we can. If today we set up this beautiful center or businesses or we set up things in our own life, why can't we have this vision? This is obviously the courage of Hussein al-Islam, what I mentioned earlier. This is one aspect of international law. The second aspect is that international law is involved in a gradual process. It is always developing. You always find new policies. You'll always find states coming up with new policies. So for example, after 9/11, America says, right, we now must increase our security, right? So there'll be more examination at airports and all this sorts of thing. And internationally, if you're traveling from other countries and you come into the airport, whatever, you're affected by the legislation of America. So already, if you're part of the international community, you can introduce new policies just like that. It's very easy. Because all you have to do is work together and announce your policy. And most likely it will be accepted. And maybe it will link to your national policy as well. But when you're in this country, what happens? Or for example, in the United Kingdom, you have a parliament, right? You have to go for voting and all these sorts of things. There's a huge procedure. You can't easily pass a law. What is the negative effect of having a lack of enforcement in international law and in international community? I want to give you some examples in relation to ISIS, or Islamic State. Just to give you a contemporary example. In August, President Obama said that the spread of ISIS is a cancer and we must expand our airstrikes across Iraq and Syria to halt ISIS. Prime Minister Cameron of the United Kingdom said the only way to defeat ISIS is to stand firm and to send a very straightforward message. A country like ours, Britain, will not be cowed by these barbaric killers. We're not going to be scared by these barbaric killers. I'm just giving you these general statements which are made in the media. Now, look at the boldness of these statements. They're saying we're not going to bomb a country. Finish, that's it now. What can we do as Muslims? They are saying, okay, they have a so-called legitimate reason that they want to take down ISIS. But if they decide in bombing a country and bombing villages, then they've made the decision. Where is the Muslim voice? Okay? Let me give you some further examples. What is not always said in these statements, because you can't see it. Prime Minister Cameron, David Cameron, or Obama will say we want to crack down on ISIS. What they don't also share with you or share with us is the way in which they also train ISIS members and also try to have policies in the region to pit Muslims against Muslims. Now, one of there's a very good guy, Nafiz Ahmed. He's a British scholar who continually writes about militant policy. If you just search him, he writes some very good articles. When I was reading his article in his plane, I saw some very good facts which I want to share with you. He writes that in Iraq, there are two policies going on at the moment. One is social welfare and the other is psychological welfare. Social welfare, which is what appears to us and which is said in the media, is that we are in Iraq to make the lives of Iraqis better. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard this many, many times, right? We are there to make the lives of Iraqis better. And that is known as social welfare. They're trying to help Iraqi people. And you might see that giving aid and whatever. The other thing, however, is they delegitimize or they give support to extremists or local enemies in that region. So for example, they will help supply arms to extremists, or they will, for example, allow an extremist group to have access to a region, etc. Now it might not be proactively doing something, but by not acting, they will allow something to happen. And that is kind of psychological warfare, where they try to allow an extremist ideology to take over the minds and the hearts of people. So what is the end game of all of this? By allowing two groups to fight each other, and America seen as a savior, or UK seen as a savior, they are then able to invade that country with the pretext of helping people, because they say, well, now the region is destabilized. Muslims are fighting against each other. We have to go in. But that destabilization occurred because they had a hand in it. So there is that kind of spying and infiltration happening, just as it was there in Karbala. There's nothing new about it. But we have to catch on to that. And we have to call that as it is. We do sometimes say, well, you know, when we say we have a few so-called extremists in our religion. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, because we can't deny the fact that, okay, somebody is saying La ilaha illallah and they're going to kill somebody. We can't deny that fact. But no, because also most likely that person may be a spy. Maybe that person is created by American Britain. So it's not that we have to be so apologetic. Yes, we have to admit things, but we also have to call out America and UK for its own actions. And whenever I've only seen this a few times, whether you watch programs in United Kingdom or America, we have a program called Question Time and others. Whenever people do call out these things, most of the politicians there don't have a response. As soon as you put a lot of pressure on the political process, they have to reveal facts. That's how facts come out. And we have to have the courage to do that. Salawat. The second example I want to give you, or the second aspect of international, which is very interesting, is called international custom. And that basically means, it's very simple. It means when states behave continuously and they behave together, they create like a sunnah, all right? They create a practice. So if, for example, America and Britain constantly make a policy or an action of invading countries to help people. They say, no, we want to give rights to people, and this has happened over the last 10 years, then this becomes a custom for the international community, like a sunnah, okay? That this is the sunnah of America and Britain, of how to act in the world. Whenever there's suffering in a country, they will go in and invade. Now, what is very interesting about this is that if governments constantly act like this, then they begin to form an international custom. It's kind of like a law. So people find it very difficult to argue against it. This becomes part of the established order. See, today it's very normal for, I was in America before I came here, and the debate I was in Australia. I was in Australia. I love America too much, no. I'm a proud British. I'll argue with Jawad Bhai about that, no. I was in Australia before coming to America, and they were debating actually how to help America, right? And how to help UK. And they were saying, well, we also have to care about human rights. We also have to establish democracy in Iraq. Now this language is very important, because they are using the language, which is the sunnah, if you like, or the custom of America and Britain. America and Britain use that language all the time. Now Australia is using the same language. Why? Because it's become part of the established order. It's become part of the established policy that that's the way to help people, right? So, one of the intriguing things about this is if you do it enough, it becomes a law. But the problem is, obviously, as you can see, it's not fair if governments get together and make this policy, and then obviously Muslims are on the receiving end. Just because people have got together and say we want to make this policy doesn't make it right, but this is part of international law. One of the things which is fueling ISIS, which is fueling sectarian conflict, for example in Syria, is the role of the Gulf states. I have it here, Salawat please. What has happened, especially since March and April 2011, which has happened in Bahrain, which is now affecting Iraq, is Salawat please, sorry. Yes. Is the cooperation of Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. They actually formed a Gulf Cooperation Council, and they wanted to make sure that they could send Saudi troops to Bahrain to crush the protests, right? They sent like 1,500 troops and they crushed protests. So this is one of the initial examples of this. But now what they're doing is they're supplying arms to so-called jihadis or extremist groups to make sure that the sectarian conflict is continually fueled. That they always have weapons and they can continually fight each other. So now what's happening is that although there's a positive to states coming together and promoting human rights, the negative is when they start to infringe rights or they start to make deals behind the table in order to make sure that sectarian conflict continues so that other states can benefit. And I think only 3-4 days ago in the morning when I was watching the news, and this is really common knowledge, but I don't think anybody's picking up on this, they just reported very casually that ISIS has made 120 million or whatever profit, or billion profit, I don't know, on oil, right? So, sorry, what's the figure?
$1 million.
Million, 120 million. $120 million on oil, right? Now, they're saying this very casually, but one of Nafiz Ahmad actually reports that EU, the European Union member states, brokered a deal with ISIS that they would buy the oil from them. Okay? And they didn't reveal the names of the member states or the representatives that brokered this deal. So ISIS is giving oil to EU and to America, right? This is a fact now. So although what is reported in the media is ISIS, they say ISIS is very powerful and they're getting money and they're getting funding and all these sorts of things. Well, no, it's not that they're getting powerful themselves. They are negotiating and brokering deals. Now again, we have to understand that very specifically. It's okay saying that. We have to understand how it's done. If a Gulf Cooperation Council is formed, right, between all these states of Kuwait and Qatar and all that, where is our council? How united are Muslims today? Are we as Muslim states united? Are we united in Muslim communities in Seattle or in America or in UK? We can't even unite within our different cultures of Iraqis and Afghanis and Iranis and Khojas and Indians and Pakistan. We are still fighting even that amongst ourselves. We can't even do that. We have to have a far-sighted vision that look, if these guys are forming corporations and councils, we have to do the same. We also have to say, right, we're going to stop that negotiation of oil. We're going to stop that infiltration process. We're going to have our own sense of psychology. And we cannot even do that. And Hussein a.s., as you know, and Muslim ibn Aqil, they were trying to do that because they were trying to unite people. They were trying to unite Kufans. When we talk about Karbala transcending cultures, as we discussed yesterday, perhaps this point is even more important today than it was yesterday. Because when Hussein al-Islam is welcoming different cultures and religions under his caravan and saying, please join me, do we do that with other cultures and other Muslims? We don't always work together. And that causes a huge rift within the Muslim Ummah. So one of the lessons that we have to learn from the international community is working together and then also trying to respond to these injustices that are created. Salawat. The final thing that I want to end on before the Maqtal, I just want to share with you Hussein alayhi salam's response to someone that did tell him that you should not go on this journey and be scared of Yazid and Muawiyah. This was his response, right? And this is reported, I think in Kitab al-Irshad, or Ibn Tawus. He said that, oh brother, you are telling me not to go on this journey. And this is what he responds. Have you not realized that a trait of the despicableness of the world before Allah is that the head of Yahya, son of Zakaria, was given a gift to one of the adulteresses of the Bani Israel? Do you not know that the Bani Israel killed 70 prophets at the time between dawn and sunrise? He says, بَيْنَ طُلُوعِ الْفَجْرِ إِلَى طُلُوعِ الشَّمْسِ, between dawn and sunrise. And then after killing prophets, they went to their markets and started buying and selling goods as if they had not committed anything. Astaghfirullah. How can you kill a prophet and then go and act as if nothing has happened? Allah never made haste against them. Rather, He gave them some respite or time, and then got hold of them after that. The grip of a resolute, retributive one. Fear Allah, O Aba Abdul Rahman. This was the person that was trying to advise Imam Hussein Islam. Fear Allah, O Aba Abdul Rahman, and never deny me your help. This was Hussein's response. What can we learn from this in relation to what I've just said? He's saying two very simple things. Let us never forget the crimes and the injustices done against humanity, whether it is by Muslims or non-Muslims, whether by the international community or by others. And he's being very specific here. He's saying, look at how they killed the Anbiya. And not only that, they did not have that conscience to reflect on it. One of the saving graces of human beings, which differentiates us between animals, is our conscience. If we want to revive the message of Al-Hussein Islam today, we have to awaken people's consciences. That is the way. We make people feel guilty. We make people feel guilty for their crimes. It might sound like a very abstract thing, like a very general thing. But when you start to look somebody in the eye, or you start telling the truth, you start showing courage, all of us are human beings today. We all have to go to sleep at night. And if that seed is planted in our mind, then we can act. And that's what Hussein a.s. was trying to do. And second is, he never ever gave up. Never. He still tried to unite. He still tried to answer the call of the Kufans. Even though his messengers were being killed, still, even if unity meant in his family, even if it meant Ali Akbar, Abbas, Qasim, Zainab salamullahi alayha, even if it meant only unity within his family and his camp, he held that unity. We might not be able to unite with all Muslims just now, but can't we unite with our families? Can't we unite in the center? Can't we unite in one region? Can't we at least accomplish that? That's still within our means. Inshallah, if we can accomplish that level of unity, then we can say, right, now we can have unity with other international Muslim communities. At least let us learn from Hussein al-Islam. Unity within the family, a unity within the caravan. But as I said yesterday, if we drive people away from the caravan of Karbala, labeling them something else, or judging them, or not working with them because they have a different culture or different language, or not welcoming them, then we are to blame. As I said, the message of Hussein al-Islam is the message of unity. And if we can learn from that, then inshallah we will revive the message of Karbala, and inshallah Allah will quicken the reappearance of our 12th Imam. Salawat. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. As we have reached this third night, and we are looking at the type of people who are martyred on the journey of Karbala, during the journey of Karbala, one man stands out, and that is Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil, the cousin of Hussein alayhi salam. He was such a brave man. As I said, that when he reached Kufa, people started to support him. But due to bribes and infiltration, our poor Muslim ibn Aqil was left alone praying. And as he turned around, he found nobody, or he found just a few people. Let me recount to you the way he was martyred, because it was brutal and he did not have time to take stock of what happened. When Muslim ibn Aqil was being hunted down, he had to stay in different places. In one of the places that he stayed, a female servant comes to him and she says, "My master, you have not slept the whole night." Muslim ibn Aqil replies, "I slept a while, and in my sleep I saw my uncle, the commander of the faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was saying to me, 'O Muslim, hurry and quickly come to us.'" Can you imagine this? Before your death, you know that you're going to die. You want to help Hussein alayhi salam, but death is destined for you. He says, "I fear the last day of my life has approached." Muslim ibn Aqil then started to think. But even before he could think, soldiers started to infiltrate the house and started to burn the house. Muslim ibn Aqil started to come out of the house and he started fighting with the soldiers, killing some. He started to mount on his horse, but he was dragged. He was taken off the horse and he was dragged and taken to Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad said, "It is all the same to me whether you salute me or not. You, Muslim ibn Aqil, will be beheaded. You are going to be executed." Muslim ibn Aqil said, "This will not be the first time that worse than you have killed better than me." Ibn Ziyad started to abuse Muslim ibn Aqil. He said that you have risen against a ruler and caused discord in the community. Muslim ibn Aqil answered, "O Ibn Ziyad, it was Muawiyah and his son Yazid that have caused disunity, and you have spread corruption. I am hopeful that Allah will grant me martyrdom by the hands of the worst and the most filthiest of his creatures, Yazid." Then Ibn Ziyad ordered Bukayr ibn Khumran to take Muslim ibn Aqil to the top of the palace and to behead him. As Muslim ibn Aqil was being led to his execution, he started to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh brothers and sisters, may we get the opportunity to praise Allah as we die. He said, "O Allah, you be the final judge between us and these people who have summoned us, led to us and betrayed us." Then, during the fight that he had with Bukayr, Muslim had struck him with a fierce blow. However, Bukayr then started to grab Muslim and he carried out Ibn Ziyad's orders. He took Muslim to the roof of the palace, brothers and sisters, and then he ordered Muslim to kneel down and stretched his head over the edge of the wall of the palace. Then he mercilessly beheaded him. When the axe split Muslim ibn Aqil's neck, Muslim ibn Aqil's head fell from the top of the palace to the ground. After this, the soldiers were ordered to throw Muslim ibn Aqil's body into the ground. In this way, Muslim ibn Aqil's souls departed. He was treated like an animal, and Ibn Ziyad had no care. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah bless and elevate the shuhada. Matam al-Hussein. Ya Hussein.